Everyone, Jared Sandler with Longhorn Investments here with you today, and I'm joined by one of our preferred appraisers, our friend here at Longhorn, because of the great work that she does and her team does, Liberty LeBrun from Homewood Appraisal Group. Liberty, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jared. This is my first podcast, so my name is Liberty LeBrun, and I do appraisals. Anyway, our office is located, our home office is located in Plano, but I sit on the east side of Dallas. I'm out in Commerce. So, but I have a team up here in Dallas, and we have a team in Houston, and we have a team in San Antonio that we've been building. And you guys are one of our preferred lenders.
Well, we appreciate that. You guys do such great work, and the appraisal's a huge part of the process for what we do. And I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who know what an appraisal is. They've had several of them. But for those who are wondering, what the heck? I know what the word is, but how would you describe or characterize an appraisal to someone?
Okay, so an appraisal is a valuation of a property that a lender is willing to give you money to purchase. So the appraisal is part of the lending process. So you'll be getting the appraisal in order to find out what most is future value with you guys subject to after the repair, to find out what the market is willing to pay for this property once it's been completed or purchased. So I'm thinking, to put it into words on what an appraisal is, it's basically research and data, and we gather group data, market data, individual data for the neighborhood subdivision, break it down a lot more finite than, say, BPO or an agent does to figure out what's going to be on the market, what it'd sell for.
All right, you mentioned subject to appraisal. I think a lot of people are maybe more familiar with just your standard as-is appraisal, which is something that like a retail shopper would get that determines or tells the story of the value as is, right? So we get asked all the time, well, how do they determine the value? What is subject to, and how does that all work? Because they're so conditioned to think through the terms of an as-is appraisal. So how would you describe the subject to portion of it specifically? And I know you mentioned you do the research and the data, but what is needed basically for you to be able to determine the future value?
Okay. You're correct. About 80% of our appraisals are conventional or FHA, and they're as is. At the moment, the market is selling. And so what we do is we need to figure out how much the property is worth after the repair. So most of the investors will give us a budget, and the budget will entail details pertaining to what they're going to do as far as changing the home into maybe not so desirable to a desirable property. And everybody wants something that they don't have to fix, so they want to come in and buy it. And most of the buyers, like I said, 80% is usually as is. So best product, best price. So what you do is you take this house that's dilapidated, that maybe has been on the market for 100 and something days, and you have a rehab budget. You go in and you fix it up. And what we have to do is determine where in the market it's going to place after it's been repaired. So we kind of disregard what it looks like right now. It could be an old hoarder's house or something, and it's going to need this, this, and this. And we'll look at the budget and see what's in the market available that is similar to what you're going to put into it. Say you're repairing everything, you go down to the studs. Well, it's not going to be new construction, but it's going to be up there if you're putting that much money into it, and then you're going to try to sell it. So we look for comps that are similar to what you're putting into the subject.
And is it a dollar amount, or are you looking at the specific line items that are being done? So it's not like, hey, I'm putting $100,000 in. That house down the street put $100,000 in. It might not always line up, right? My 100,000 and your 100,000 could be different.
It could be different. Now, there's models out there that we kind of keep in the back of our mind, you know, price per square foot. There's contractors that have come in and say, I need $35 a square foot in order to get it completely remodeled, or 50, depending on the neighborhood and stuff, depending on what you're putting in there. Because there's different qualities of cabinets and flooring and windows, and there's different quality of stuff. And my partner and I both invest. So I got into the investment back in 2011, flipped my first house. And he also has houses that he's flipped and rented, and he also had a painting company for a while. And so we're privy to the necessity of what you need to do the rehab. And that's one reason I taper into the hard money loans and the private lending loans, is because I know what it takes to make that house the one that's going to sell first on the market in this neighborhood. So we don't have a price per se. You know, and two similar houses in two different neighborhoods might take $100,000 for this house, but might only take $50 for this one. It's the neighborhood market that determines how much you really need to put into that house. So if you're on a lower scale neighborhood, basically, say you're in the $200,000-$300,000 neighborhood and you're trying to hit that $300,000 mark, you're not necessarily going to have to put $100,000 in there. And sometimes it's good to consult with an appraisal prior to doing that, because you go in to look at the house and you're saying, okay, you know, I'm going to completely redo all of this. Well, then you might be the first one on the market in there, and it might not have been necessary, because the next house that we could use as a comp might not have new windows and might not have one bathroom remodeled, but one is. And we'll have to use that one and try to figure out if there's an adjustment or not. And if there's no provable adjustment, we can't make the adjustment as an appraiser. And we'll get agents that come back and they'll say, hey, but we did both bathrooms and nobody's done that. And you're the first one that has, you know, your seller's the first one that has. So we're kind of in a conundrum without the proof. We have to prove it. So it has to be backed by data. And at that point, sometimes we could go outside that neighborhood, but sometimes we can't. And so first, do your due diligence, check the market out. And if you're going to rehab this house, you might not have to put in everything you want to put in. You know, you might not have to do the windows. You might not have to do the HVAC, or you might not have to do the kitchen cabinets, but change the countertops kind of thing. And you know, for an investor part, it's kind of like, you know, you could save money that way and still get the top dollar for that neighborhood, and only maybe end up only putting 20 or 25,000 in it. It depends on the market research that we come up with. And sometimes we'll be in some neighborhoods and everybody's replacing everything. You know, just plan on not getting the top dollar if you're not replacing the windows and everybody else has. And I don't have any comps to utilize that have not replaced the windows. There's going to be a deduction, you know.
Well, we're going to get into some more strategy and some tips and stuff here in a little bit, and that's great insight. I know one of the most common questions I get is, well, how quickly can we get the appraisal back? So what is a typical turnaround time?
For the normal conventional lenders, they usually give us an assignment 7 to 10 days out. So they'll get the appraisal request and they'll send it to us, and we'll have a normal turn time is 7 to 10 days out. Now you guys are pushing, you know, they get these wholesalers and they're like, as soon as you sign that contract, it has to be closed in 4 days. And so
they want it closed yesterday sometimes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, but then they don't want us in. They don't want to let us in.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't get in.
Yeah, that's another challenge sometimes.
Right. No, make it work. That's what I tell my appraisers. I said, don't, just tell them to make it work. And they want it to close, they'll make it work. And we're doing it for our lenders. It's the lender's asset, and say the outside looks good, but if we go inside, there's no floors, nothing, and the borrower isn't. They got a $30,000 budget and don't know that they're going to need $80,000 to fix it up. That's our eyes, or our documentation for everybody involved.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I don't get asked this question. I always think it's an important thing for borrowers to know. To whom is your allegiance? I mean, you don't work for us. You don't work for the borrower, right? So how would you describe where you fit in that equation?
Okay. Our allegiance is to an unbiased, documented appraisal. We don't really have an allegiance other to our integrity. We work for the lender. We are securing their asset end of it. So the borrowers, they come back and tell us, well, we paid for it, but we technically, the client is our lender. It's part of the transaction. So being part of the transaction, just like the title company and stuff, you're not, bartering them, hey, man, give me the title order, give me this or that doc. It all goes through the lender. You're the lender's client, the lender's my client. And so that's kind of the order of things.
But we're not, just as a borrower might come to you and say, well, Liberty, can't you up the value of the appraisal? And you're going to say, no, because of X, Y, and Z. We're not on our end going to you and saying, hey, Liberty, can you knock the value down because we want the borrower to have more skin in the game? You are Switzerland in that regard. Correct. You don't answer to us when it comes to the value and the work you do. You don't answer to the borrower as well. You can provide some guidance and insight and be a help in that regard, but you're not answering to us in any way.
No. In fact, we hardly talk to you guys. we get the order, and then I shuffle around by the due date and how quick you need it, and who's most efficient, who's going to be in the neighborhood with my team, and we don't worry about what the end game is, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's not our fault. We're finding the data for you, for the borrower, everybody involved. We find the data, we do the research, and see what would be the best possible scenario for this property based on the budget that is provided by the borrower.
All right, well, I want to get into that. We're talking with Liberty LeBrun from Homewood Appraisal Group. We love when we get an appraisal that comes back and it meets the value that the borrower anticipates, because that means that there aren't going to be any issues and we're going to be able to get this to the finish line. But sometimes, every once in a while, an appraisal comes back and it's not just a couple $1,000s lower. That's usually not a big deal, but maybe it's significantly lower than what they were anticipating. What does it mean if your appraisal comes in lower than what your estimate was?
Well, that means that sometimes that little section of the market might be stagnant. I can't really say that Dallas is declining. It's just not true. And, it might have only went up 2 or 3% over the last 6 months. And we're looking at it, and they're doing projections. They're anticipating 12 like it was last year. Sometimes they don't have a sufficient enough budget for the condition that the house is currently in. Sometimes they'll provide a low budget and they're only doing minimal work, say paint and carpeting, and they're not updating the bathrooms or the kitchen or any other major components that are needed to be updated. And so we can't justify giving them that top dollar value without a budget to support it. That would not being unbiased or fair to anybody. But the borrower, the investor, and the agent or the wholesaler needs to do good amount of research before they come and say, that we're way too low in value.
Yeah, and I always tell people, hey, I guess it's possible that every once in a while, when we're all human, maybe they can present something that suggests that it should be $5,000 more than whatever the appraisal was, but not 50,000, right? Not 80. If there's a discrepancy like that, it's actually in the moment, they don't like to see it because best laid plans, right? But to some degree, an appraisal, no matter what the value is, no matter what number you come back with, an appraisal is a good thing because it is going to point you in the right direction. And sometimes that right direction might be a stop sign, right? So how can a low appraisal maybe save a borrower from entering some waters that they don't want to enter into?
Well, yeah, sometimes the house is in worse condition and they don't have the adequate budget and they open Pandora's box. So they get in there and it's going to cost a lot more money and it's not going to sell. They could take that money to another neighborhood, and get the same type of a better quality house that's going to sell for more and move, past that. I know a lot of them come back and say, well, I'm going to lose my deposit, because the appraisal didn't come in. And I'd have to come back to them and just say, do you know some off the market sales? They'll come and tell me the neighbor across the street or the neighbor next door sold this for 200,000 and say 250, and you're only coming in at 200. Can you get me a copy of that HUD? Because we could use off the market sales as long as they're already closed, and if you could provide us with some pictures of what they did on the inside to say that it's a comparable property. And sometimes you'll get agents that'll sell something off the market or they're fixing to put it on the market, and an investor or something comes over there and they see that this house, they're doing work to it, and then they come in and say, hey, when are you putting it on the market? I'd like to buy it for a rental or my daughter or something like that. And then they say, okay, we're selling it for $300,000. We're going to list it, say, December 1st. And so they've already closed on it. The daughter's already moved in. Let us know, because that's the most recent and available, and not all the market data. The market data isn't going to show us that. The taxes aren't going to show us that. This is a non-disclosure state. So we can do the appraisal based on the HUD. So that's a little extra that a lot of agents and investors and stuff don't know. My buddy sold this house right down the street. So I do a lot. I do have a lot of HUDs that come through for especially new construction. Those are a lot of times sold off the market. Some other things that they don't take in consideration is the location. They're backed up to a railroad track, and the market data might show that just being backed up to that will cost them 20 or 30 grand, when they're giving me comps that are not backed up to a railroad track or not backed up to an apartment complex or an adverse location, and that hurts the project deal.
Yeah, and just, not from direct experience, but I guess indirect experience. I've had a borrower with whom I had a relationship decided to go in a different direction on a deal because the appraisal came back low, and low by a significant amount. And, we try to explain, hey, maybe this is a sign that you should either renegotiate with the seller, or maybe it's just not the right deal. And I think that the borrower engaged with the appraiser to understand how they got from A to B, but the borrower wasn't satisfied. And sometimes when you're in the eye of the storm, and it's an emotional thing, I get it, but they found a lender who would essentially play ball with the value, right? And so they satisfied them on the front end. But then when I checked in with that borrower a few months later, they told me they're out of the game right now. They lost a lot of money on that deal because they couldn't sell it for anywhere near what they needed to sell it to make money on it. And so that's why, again, no one wants the appraisal that's going to tell them to stop doing what they've been doing.
That.
But that's why it's important for us from a lending standpoint to get an unbiased valuation.
Correct.
And whether you're flipping it or it's a rental, when you refi, you got to get an appraisal again. And if that appraisal tells you the story that you didn't want to hear the first time,
correct,
then now your cash to close is going to be through the roof and you're going to be stuck. And so sometimes, and I always tell borrowers this before we even engage in a deal, because it's a lot tougher to have that conversation when they're staring at the appraisal they don't like, because someone has told them, someone they trust has told them, no, that's wrong, even though they don't have your expertise, or through and this is the toughest one, when it's through their own work, now you're kind of challenging you're not directly intending to challenge their intellect, but if they came up with, well, I think this property's worth X, and the reality is it's worth way less than X, sometimes they almost take offense to that, right? Because you're telling me that I'm wrong. And it's not easy to have those conversations when there's money involved.
I get that a lot. I get that. I've been investing for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. Okay. I'm pulling the data, especially the data in the last 90 days, the most important data, what the market's doing today, right now. And this is what you're going to get, especially with the type of loans you guys do. Your investors don't want to be in them for more than 90 days. So, the projection is you don't want anybody to get hurt. And we need to be as unbiased as possible. We don't want any of the investors coming back and getting hurt and saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that deal and the appraiser appraised this too high. Well, we don't want that either, just like we don't like to come in low either. But when the data we have so many components to put the appraisal together and so many outlets of data that we have to compile in order to get the value that we get. And once we do that, it's to us, after reading it for, I've been doing it for 11 years, after reading the data and knowing that it's saying this, we're protecting you and your investment, even though it's coming in lower than you would like. We don't like killing deals. That's not the goal. If we could prove what you're saying, if we could prove it, then we'll go ahead and, try to help and make sure we have the best selection of comps. And we'll even come back to you and say, okay, can you give us a little more detail on your budget? Because you just said flooring and everybody has wood floors in this neighborhood. What are you putting in? Or you say plumbing, but what are you doing with the plumbing? Is that just the fixtures? So we'll come back and question when we're trying to really, really pick it apart if it's not evident. But when the data is presented and once we put it together and it's all compiled, sometimes it's hard to get away from. And the emotional factor, sometimes the borrowers get too emotionally into this one particular property. They really wanted it. They have a great vision. Well, we might have to have that great vision on another property that's going to be profitable for you.
Well, sometimes you don't do a deal so that you can do deals down the line, right? You don't want to be in a spot where a deal just totally ends your investing career because it puts you in a bad spot. Some of the best stories that I've heard, or the most rewarding ones when it comes to an appraisal that comes back a little bit lower, is one, maybe they use that, go back to the seller, negotiate a lower price that makes the deal make sense, a lower sales price, or
that's the best one.
Yeah,
to go back
that.
to the seller's too high.
Yeah, or two, and you do a great job of this, you and your team. Hey, can you help me understand where can I maximize the value? And maybe they realize they don't need to spend nearly as much on their scope of work, whether it's a section of the house or a specific item. They can lower that And now instead of spending $80,000 where you're not getting the ROI on it,
right?
I'm just throwing a number out now. It's $50,000, and that $30,000 difference is the difference between the deal not making sense and the deal making sense. And so
Right.
I don't want to say that an appraisal is an answer key, because that's not maybe the right way, but sometimes it's a blueprint to what your next step should be to allow you to get the deal across the finish line.
Correct. And a lot of times we'll do neighborhood research and we'll be looking at some of these budgets, and we got a lot of visionary investors, and they're wanting to do everything to this property, and it's in a neighborhood that doesn't need everything. And at that point you could save a few dollars by putting it the best product, but not necessarily have to change absolutely everything in the house. Save yourself, a little bit. Maybe the roof was replaced 5 years ago because there was huge hailstorm and it happened to be in Garland and everybody got a new roof. You don't need to put another roof on there. Save that, $10,000-$12,000 for a roof. And exactly, we pick all of that stuff apart as well, and we'll see that they're putting too much in the budget, and we'll also see they're not putting enough in the budget for this particular neighborhood.
All right, last one on this. What is the best way, the most beneficial way for a borrower to engage you or someone from your team when the appraisal comes back low? It's obviously not, Liberty, you're the biggest idiot, make it $50,000.
I've gotten that though.
But what's the best way, and what information can they have, I don't know, what is the most productive conversations in that situation? What are they, or how do they originate?
Okay, so it's a reconsideration of value, and you guys just changed your policy where if you have a dispute, the borrower needs to go to the appraiser. So the best thing to do, Fannie Mae just put this new regulation out, and the lender's only supposed to engage us one time for a reconsideration of value. So if you're doing it through a conventional lender or any other type, the best thing to do is come up with 5 comparables. No more than 5. We're not allowed to take more than 5. That's for Fannie Mae. You guys, evidently, we could do a little bit more. But you come back one time and you give us the comps that you feel were more supportive in the value that you were intending. And we get that a lot of times, and a lot of times it's houses that are completely remodeled. Sometimes they'll throw in a new construction. And the best way is to try to find what you're going to do to the house. Try to find those type of comparables. And we stay around 25% gross living area, and if it has a 2-car garage, try to find one with a 2-car garage. We can do adjustments as long as we have the model to do that, to find out what the difference is between a 1 and a 2-car, which is called the match paired analysis. We do that analysis, and group data analysis and regression analysis. We've got a lot of analysis we got to do. But the best thing for the borrowers to give us 5 comparables that they feel are more suitable, and ask us, nicely. If you're telling us that we're stupid and everything like that, it's like, they don't have the appraisal license. They haven't been doing this for 10 years, And
but they were told by someone that it's worth more, so that person must be right.
But we want to help you out, and we go through these, and we're trying to find the best comps. And you have your vision, and we have the blueprint of your vision, but we don't see the vision unless we get more detail from you. And sometimes if you've had one, there's some investors that'll say, look, I know my budget's low. We do most of the manpower, so we're alleviating 45% of the cost because of our own personal labor. And this was our finished product 2 blocks down the street. Can you look at this? Yeah, we'll look at it. Go ahead and provide that. Provide as much information that you feel we need to help support your vision. And so that's pretty much what we could do. And of course, always call and ask questions. And if my team is uncomfortable about answering the questions, they will usually put you on a call with me because I have it all logged in my head. They're worried about not saying the right thing, but most of the time they do. They have it too. They're just a little intimidated when a borrower's upset.
and my recommendation to a borrower is always, hey, have the conversation and go in there with the hope and goal that you're going to learn something. If you get the value changed
every day, learning's every day.
Yeah, but if you get the value changed, great. I mean, I know in the back of my head, again, if the disparity is $50,000, you're probably not going to close that gap. But what my hope is always that they hang up the phone. Okay, you know what? I understand now why I was off, or the person who explained to me why the value was going to be higher than I thought, why they were off. And I can now better read things through the lens of an appraiser. They're not going to have that knowledge, right? But I just think that the knowledge of why is really important and can help inform you with your next project and your next project and your next project, so that you don't run into the same pitfalls, which I guess leads me to my next question. We're here with Liberty LeBrun from Homewood Appraisal Group. I think a lot of times the biggest gap is they'll provide these addresses and they're not comps. They're not appropriate comps because of this factor or that factor. And maybe they're latched onto one thing, like, oh, well, it's only 0.7 of a mile away. But there are other characteristics that make it not a comp. So what are some of the things that you hear or see from folks where there maybe is a misunderstanding and all the things that need to line up for it to be a comp?
So a lot of times we'll get sometimes in specific neighborhoods, and they'll send us a comp that's in another city in another school district. And you could see, we'll do the market research and we'll see that that particular elementary school is bringing 20 or 30,000 more to the table. And it's the same year built. It's the same house, same 1 bedroom, or say 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1 car garage, same square footage, but it's on the other side of that school district. It could be still in Richardson's. It could be the same city. Sometimes the school district is very important. And you'll see that in Allen. You'll see that in Richardson, in the Dallas DFW area, Plano, Plano West, Plano East. The breakdown, we could see that. And we look for that. The same with cities. Certain cities have a little bit higher tax bracket, so you'll see those houses sell for a few thousand less, and you're wondering why they're all the same school district. Why on this side of the road? Well, it says Plano and this says Richardson. So we do look at all of that, and it would be best if you find a comp that's as close as you can. The distance is important. Fannie Mae just took away the regulation where we had to be within a mile. They took that away and said, as long as we do the market research for that particular neighborhood. So we could be 2 miles away in Richardson, and they're both the same type of neighborhood and could be even the same builder at one point. And the elementary schools, everything's comparable. We could use that comp, but all that data has to come in. That market research has to say the same thing for your neighborhood and that neighborhood before we could use it as a comp. It's a lot more data research. Of course, the closer we are, the more true, because in our grid on the appraisal, the first thing is the sale date, which is the most important. And so we try to find comps that are within 90 days because that's what the market's dictating. That's the closest. And then the next one is location. So our location is very important. So it gives more weight than the gross living area or the condition or anything. The location is superior. So what we need to do is, as an investor, you need to try to find what's going on in that particular neighborhood. And some neighborhoods are big and they'll have 100 comps in there, and some are super, super small and you only have 4 or 5. So you are better off finding a comp that's a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller in the same neighborhood. And we would use that first. It's 2 houses down, but it's, 500 square feet more or 500 square feet less, but they did everything that I'm doing to this house. Go ahead and use that. We could use that because that gross living area is not as important as the location or the date of sale. So, this sold yesterday. Let's pull that. That'll be better. So that's kind of what we look for. We have a grid and it has like 17 different line items and locations, the top 4.
I want to go through some misconceptions. One, it seems like price per square foot. People just
the biggest one.
Yeah. Okay. So and someone listening might wonder, well, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
What in asking that? What am I asking? And what is your advice or response to folks who kind of lean on that?
Okay, the price per square foot, agents use that to find their comps. So they're looking at, say, $200 a square foot, and this house is completely remodeled and everything, but they don't take into consideration that this one has a garage and your subject doesn't, or that it's 200 square feet less and your subject is 1,200 and not 1,000. So the price per square foot, we have to throw that completely out because how we do our research is by that grid that we have with all those different items. And each item is what puts the value together. So we break it apart. The gross living area is separate from the garage. And if you see, there's a line item for the garage. The bathrooms are different. All of that's included in a price per square foot. So you might have, a 3-bath subject, and then you're bringing me a comp with a 2-bath or a 4-bath, and the price per square foot isn't really the same because we're going to have to deduct or add to that amenity in order to see what the true value is. We have a whole lot more. And the location, if it's got a pretty green belt behind it and that view, or you're on the lake, all those kind of things we take into factor. And we gather the group data and match paired analysis for both and figure out what that adjustment would bring and how much that house is worth.
Another one, I guess I'll just kind of group it, the various amenities that people sometimes think add value. Some do, some don't. What are some of the things that stand out that really can add value? What are some of the things that people oftentimes believe add value that really don't end up adding value?
It seems like always if you're going to add something, add a bathroom. The bathrooms are just getting more expensive. The data is just, and it's really not that much to add one if you could back it up to already a water line or something. But as far as amenities go, it depends on that particular market. We have to do a match paired analysis of that particular market. If you're going to put a workshop on that property, and it's going to cost you $55,000 to put that workshop, you better see if it's going to bring more money. Because a lot of times the adding of something like that usually will only bring a portion of what you paid for it. I get a lot, how much will it be if I add a pool? They quoted me $75,000 to add this pool in, and everybody in the neighborhood has a pool. So the house across the street that didn't have a pool only sold for $10,000 less, and it's the same square footage, same bathroom, same bedroom, same garage. You're only going to get $10,000. So the best thing to do is to consult an appraiser about that neighborhood before you go and add anything like that. And don't expect that you're going to get $90,000 or $75,000 because you had added it 2 years before and everybody in the neighborhood has one. So, and it has to be attached. I get, sometimes we'll get structures that are put on there, and
ADUs, additional dwelling unit type things.
Yeah, they have to have a foundation. They have to have a foundation and attached to the land. Don't bring in a shed and put it on blocks and then expect, well, I paid $7,500 for this. We can't even count it, because anybody could come in with a skid and pop it up on a truck and take it out. It has to be attached with a foundation.
What are some other tips and tricks or do's and don'ts, things that jump to the top of your mind when thinking of things through the lens of an investor?
Okay, so a lot of times we can add value when you completely remodel. The two basic components are the bathroom and the kitchen. Who's in there the most? The homeowner that's in there. You put a new bathroom, a new kitchen, and then update the flooring. Some of the items that we have that are considered maintenance items, and Fannie Mae considers this, is the flooring needs to be replaced every 15 years at least, and the roof and the paint. So those kind of things. Yeah, if that's all you're doing, then you're not gonna get very much in value. As far as, you might be thinking you're gonna get it up 20, 30 grand, and you're only putting about 7,500 into it. Those items aren't as beneficial as doing a kitchen and doing the bathrooms. That seems to do a lot. And lately, windows have been a big deal, and I think it's the energy efficiency. Windows tend to, once you put new ones in, drop your electric bill quite a bit. So I've seen a lot of people adding the windows in, and it'll just boost up the value.
We've covered a lot. Anything else we haven't talked about that you think would be important to discuss? I don't really know. I mean, you could ask me all the questions. I could do the answers. Coming up, I've got a lot in the head. Well, I think we've discussed a ton. I guess the last thing I would ask, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I want to make sure that we cover here, but have we talked about how an appraisal's weighted? I mean, you've
have weights.
Yeah. Let's end on that. How would you describe that process?
So we do weight the comparables. Sometimes you'll get a comparable that is just spot on. It's everything that is getting done to the house, and we'll give it the most weight. We usually put 3 or 4 sold comps in there and an active listing. The active listing is just to show the lender what's available in the neighborhood. We don't put any weight on the listing because it's not set in stone. When it's sold, then we know that's the bona fide price for that particular property. But however, so we don't give any weight to the active. We just try to find one similar so that the lender's able to see, well, this one's here and it looks similar and it's going for this much more. And I've even had some lenders hold off on closing because it's in a pending status. It's got a contract, and they ask me if I know when it's closing. I'll call the agent and I'll say, yeah, we're closing in 3 days. And they'll hold back that just to see, and the agent confirms, oh, it's 10,000 over what's asking. So what I see is, say it's 820,000 and they're getting 830, and it's showing it was on the market 5 days. You might benefit from that because it's everything that you're doing, and I'm going to go ahead and push it to the most weight. Generally, we find that a lot of the comps that we use are pretty supportive. So you'll see we started using this new data, and it has a reconciliation in there, and it puts weight on the ones that are the most comparable to the subject. So sometimes they'll be 30, 40, sometimes they'll all be 20 across the board. We don't do that. It's an automatic generation based on the adjustments that we've done. So, we weight the comps. And sometimes we'll get in certain neighborhoods where there's hardly any data, and we pull other comps outside the data, but there's so much adjustment to them that we might not give them weight. We just put them in there as additional support, and we give weight to the ones that are real close.
Liberty, this is a lot of great information, and I think that anyone listening probably is better equipped now to enter into the investing space and understand this part of the equation.
I hope so.
And I know I learned something and appreciate all the work that you do with us and with our borrowers. And thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you guys too. And the appraiser's not the evil person. We're trying to help. We're trying to make sure that the deal is secure.